We don't even have to count.
Oh, God, that's weird. We don't have to
I
count.
know, because we're sitting with each other.
We're sitting with each other, everyone. It's 90 degrees in the great city of New York.
Jen came right at the exact moment that a heat wave arrived.
Well, it's our modern world. So,
and then last night it wasn't so bad when we went out, and Eric was like, "It's not so bad," and I said, "Well, we're so close to the water." And he was like, "This entire city is close to the water, Sarah. That's not a thing in Brooklyn." And maybe it isn't, but I'm going for it.
You're going for it. Sure.
But everyone, Jen's here. She's been here. We should take a picture and send it to the Instagram.
I guess. I don't know. Fine.
I meant to take it last night when we were at that restaurant, and then...
All right, we'll see. We'll see what we can do.
But we are here, and when we are together, longtime listeners will know that we always do an AMA.
Yes.
Ask me anything.
Yeah. So we have questions from both Instagram and also from our Discord. And if there's enough material for those episodes, you'll get one in July and one in August.
But we're going to, keep it tight and try and maybe just be July.
Yeah.
We're not gonna overshoot here.
Okay. Sure.
But yeah, so you're here, you're going to the theater. We did this last week, I think.
Yes, exactly.
On the podcast. So I don't want to rehash settled law.
Well, what's funny is there's a couple of things that I think I noticed, which is like when we are recording each in our separate house, I tend to I feel like I really modulate or try to everyone my laughter, but we were just laughing before we started and it had this real multiplier effect where yeah. And I was like, oh, we're going to have to keep that down so we're not clipping and, all that stuff.
Exactly.
But yeah, we went out to a really nice Mexican restaurant last night for dinner. It was delicious.
It's called Claro.
Yeah.
And it's in Gowanus, those of you who are New Yorkers.
It was really yummy. And then today we have it's kind of hot right now. I am proud of us. We said we were each going to work and then we sat at a table and we each at least quietly worked on our own computers. I didn't get a whole lot of work done, but I did not keep you from doing your work. And that's what's important.
You did not. And you've seen the beast. You've seen the pile of paper that is my
Yes. Yes, I have.
It does exist. I haven't been lying.
I didn't think you were. I didn't think you were.
You never know.
Okay. So the way this works is we have a bunch of different questions. We will... should we say welcome to Fated Mates?
I think we should.
Okay.
Welcome to Fated Mates, everyone. I'm Sarah McLean. I read romance novels and I write them.
I'm Jennifer Prokop, a romance reader and person who has realized that now that I have chipped every no-chip manicure for the past 3 ones, maybe it is user error. Maybe it's me and not them. So I'm going to go back one more time to the good place, Nail Envy in Lincoln Park, and see if they will...
Thanks to our sponsor, Nail Envy.
Thanks to our sponsor, Nail Envy, and see how they do. And then if that one I chipped, maybe I just need to admit.
See, I gotta say, so living in cities, I don't know if this is true about Chicago, but in New York City, there are so many nail places.
Oh, yeah, so many.
You sort of feel like, you're walking down the street, you have a little bit of time to kill before your next thing. I'm just going to stop and get my nails done.
Yes.
But what you soon realize is that there are, in fact,
there are differences.
Not all nail places are the same.
Yes. Yeah.
And I find that there is a place right around the corner here that can do a no-chip nail manicure, and it is great.
Okay. Maybe I'll go get one in the morning before I go.
Oh, yeah, you should, because I won't be here.
You won't be here. Anyway, so yeah, I had a good one at Nail Envy, a good one at Old Town Nails, but then some other ones that I have chipped within a week. And I feel like...
Well, no chip feels like it should last a little more than a week.
Yeah, I think so too. Anyway,
that's our nail.
Yes, our nail salon story. Yeah. Okay, so you want to start? You have a good one to start with?
I have not even looked at these.
Okay.
All I did was take screenshots of them because you can't save just too many days ago, so I can't go to Instagram.
Wait, did you like the one I put on there?
Yes, everyone's. I skimmed them and then I saw that you put one in and I was like, what's Jen doing here? And so I put this on Instagram. If you don't follow us on Instagram, you should. We're Fated Mates Pod there. It's me, Sarah, running the show over there. Yes. You don't get anyone else. It's just me.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes people leave questions for Jen and I will answer them. I will check in with Jen and then answer them as Jen.
But yeah, the question.
So
no,
the
you
question.
have.
So I posted a story with a question box, and it said like, "Ask us anything. What would you like us to talk about?" And there were tons of questions. Jen wrote, and I will find it and laugh at you about it. Sarah, how the F do I add this to my story? Mayday, send help. Because Jen doesn't use Instagram.
No, I don't. And every time I think I kind of have a handle on it, I don't. And I'm okay with this. I need you to understand that, like, I acknowledge that it's learned helplessness, and I am determined to cling to it.
You're aware of your limitations.
Yes, I am. Exactly. So anyway, it was just funny. And then I was like, it's fine. I'm just going to put it on the Discord. So
Jen has questions from Discord and I have questions from Instagram. And let's start with M. Charles' question. How do you choose the books you read?
Oh.
Are you curated TBR pile people or mood readers?
Oh, I am is there more?
No.
Oh, I'm a 100% a mood reader.
Me too. So
I have tons and tons of books. And one of the things that I do find is like, I mostly read on my Kindle. But one of the things I do find is that there's like a weird workaround where a paper book I'll be like, oh, this looks really good. And then I'll like, basically, you guys, this is insane. And I understand this. Check it out from the library and read it on my Kindle sometimes, mostly just because I'm on the move, not necessarily because there's anything. So I really like a paper book because it's like staring me in the face. And then sometimes I do try to like, you know how you only look at the first page of the Google results? Sometimes you only look at the first page of like the Kindle screen. Mm-hmm. And so I do try to like sometimes change the way I have sorted them. Right. So I'll be like, well, show me, you know what I mean? Like I'll sort of like scroll a bunch because I mostly read actually on an iPad. Because the other thing I found is on my iPad, I can have the Kobo app and Apple Books and PDFs and like, right, it all can be in the same place. So I do try to kind of mix it up if I feel stuck and be like, well, what did I buy a month ago that I forgot about, things like that. Total mood reader though. Yeah.
Yeah, same. I have a problem because I do only look at the front page of my Kindle and I download so many Kindle books. Mm-hmm. Literally, like if somebody recommends me a book, I'll buy it on Kindle like in the moment when they recommend it to me so that I have it. So often I find myself like scrolling back through every once in a while. If I'm stuck and I don't know what to read next, I'll scroll back.
Yeah.
But I think my problem is that I very rarely don't know what to read next. I think my issue is often I know exactly what I want to read and then I have to go find a book that is that.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's easy in the sense of like, for example, today I was like, this morning I was like, I want to read, like a curvy heroine, like romance.
Right.
And I went and I knew that I had talked about one on our summer reading episode. And so I went and I found Gabby Gamez. I think that's, I think I'm saying that wrong, but it's spelled Gamez.
Right. That's a cute cover.
Yeah, it's very, very cute. And the book is called The Next Best Fling. Mm-hmm. And it's so adorable. And it was exactly what I wanted because I think that's how I read. I
know what you're looking for. Yeah, that's smart.
Okay, here's one. Here's a rec request.
Okay, I like that.
From Joseph. Who is a new listener and loves the pod.
Yeah, welcome.
Could you please rec some envy romance? And I absolutely can.
Yeah.
I am going to recommend you Chef's Kiss by TJ Alexander which has a pan woman and an NB love interest. And she's a pastry chef and the love interest, they are a kitchen manager in the company and they don't really want to be spending too much time together, but they end up really liking each other, and it's very sweet. And I really like TJ Alexander's books, and I think and everybody knows that I'm a huge chef romance fan, so I lean toward savory chefs and not pastry chefs, but I did like this one.
Now, it's interesting because a historical is Unmasked by the Marquis, which we did a deep dive on. But, I just want to point out, and I think Kat Sebastian, if I'm correct, that's the author, wrote a real specific Kat did not choose to use they, them pronouns because they felt like it was like historically unlikely. And I think that there is, so even though the character is non-binary, it like very, very clearly in their kind of way of thinking about the world and themselves, I do think that Charity does not use they, them pronouns. Like the text uses she, her. So I don't know if that's like a deal breaker for you in terms of like that portrayal. But that book is probably, pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
So, I think
what is time? It must be 6 years old, 5 or 6 years old, I would think.
So I think, I don't know if Kat would, make that same choice now, but it's really terrific.
It's a great book.
And it's just a great book. It's really fun and funny and rompy and kind of all the things you want in a great historical romance. And I also would say, but in like sort of a, like it plays it, I don't know how else to say it. Like it kind of, the whole plot is very like seriously historical romance. Whereas if you want more of a campy historical romance, Alexis Hall has a series, is it something fabulous? Spectacular is the second one. And whatever's the second one in the series has a non-binary character who is a real Penny, I can't remember their name, who's a real important character in the first book, and then they show up in the second book and get their love interest with a real great character, and again, like can't be like in the literal sense of the word. So those are two historical romances with non-binary characters.
I have another one.
Okay.
The Erica Ridley's The Perks of Loving a Wallflower, which is a very sort of beautiful, quiet romance, historical romance. It has a non-binary character in it, and that is an FMB relationship, and it's very sweet and loving, and Erica's books are really charming and fun, and they're Regencies. So interesting that we're coming up with so many historicals.
Well, it's funny because you started with
TJ Alexander.
You mentioned a cooking book, so I didn't want to say another cooking book.
Why not?
Well, I don't know. People love cooking and they love reality TV shows. So Anita Kelly's Love and Other Disasters has two contestants. London is the non-binary character, and they meet another contestant on the cooking show. And it is just a real beautiful romance. Like, I just don't, just one of the things about, I think, sometimes like with cooking, I feel like, to me, what the promise of the premise of a cooking romance for you might be great food. For me, it's that it's real fucking meticulous. All of the ingredients are perfectly measured. So there you go. Did you like that? Like what I did there?
All right. And then there's also a KJ Charles. I mean, I feel like now I'm loading. I hope you like historicals, friend, our new friend, because an Unsuitable Heir, which is the third in her Sins of the Cities series, also has an NB character. But that series is best read from the beginning to the end.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So enjoy yourselves.
This week's episode of Fated Mates is brought to you by Jess K. Hardy, author of Lips Like Sugar.
Okay, so I'm on the record for being a very, very big fan of this Bluebird Basin series. This is the second book in the series. You don't have to read the first, but you should, because the cornerstone event of the second book is the marriage, the wedding of the couple from the first book.
I love that.
So it's set in this small town in Montana, and Mira Harlow, classic romance heroine, runs the bakery. But she is also dealing with an aging mother and a 14-year-old son who's like starting to pull away from her and like find his own space. And she's running this business, and she's just like she's trying to be all things to all people. Well, when her ex-husband rolls in with his new wife, and looks perfect in every way,
I hate him already.
This wedding, she is like, I have no choice. I have got to show him that I'm like totally together and everything is great. And would you believe, Jen, at that exact moment, a full-blown rock star walks into her bakery.
Romance is unmatched, Sarah. That's why.
You would believe that.
Absolutely. Let me read it right now.
Not only that, but this full-blown rock star plants the biggest kiss of her life on her and like immediately slides into the role of fake boyfriend.
What a man.
An absolute prince. So then turns out she's going to this great wedding with an actual real life rock star. And it's going to be great for them. It's supposed to be just one night, but all of a sudden they're both catching feels. And then it's this great romance about, you know, how people with two completely different lives and a ton of responsibilities can make it work for love.
I love it. So if you would like to read a romance about strong friendships, conversations around love languages, and quite a few say anything references, then Lips Like Sugar is for you. It is available in print, audio, or ebook, and with your monthly subscription to Kindle Unlimited. And if your podcast app supports it, you can tap on the chapter title right now to buy the book. And if you stay tuned at the end of the episode, you can listen to a selection of the audiobook of Lips Like Sugar by Jess K. Hardy.
So, this is actually a really fun question.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody on our Discord, which is part of our Patreon, they have a daily question. I've mentioned this before. And their question a little while ago was, what's your favorite episode of Fated Mates? So Claudia from our Discord said to us, what is our favorite episodes of Fated Mates? And I was like, that's a fun question. I would say for me, I'll let Sarah think because I've had more time to think about it since I saw this question when I was collating them earlier. I really love the Derek Craven Day episode where Kate was on with us. And we had taken questions, I think. And what kind of happened, it was like, would Derek Craven, right, was the question.
That was a really fun episode.
And that episode is so funny. And it was like peak pandemic. And so it was really this episode where ostensibly we were talking about Derek Craven, but really we were talking about how much we were all going through. Because it was just like,
it was like, would Derek Craven wash the groceries?
Like, would Derek Craven leave you alone with these fucking kids all day? Right. I mean, so that's probably one of my favorite episodes, for sure. Just because I think I'm always delighted by, I think we're going to do one thing and we end up doing another.
Yeah. I think the episode that I think back on as being like one of the most fun we've ever done is the first category romance interstitial that we did, where we talked about the category romances that we had read when we were young that like remain with us.
Yeah.
And that was I just remember laughing
so
hard as we described the plots of these fully bananas books.
Yeah.
Including like the one where she can speak to animals and there's a secondary romance between two dogs. Like it's it's still just perfect. So I think there's that. And then of course, on a serious note, it's the Trailblazers.
Trailblazers, yeah, of course.
I think probably my most favorite Trailblazer episode. That's hard.
That's hard to say.
But I would say that it's probably Vincent Virga.
Okay.
Talking just about writing gay romance at a time when New York, as a New Yorker, at a time when New York's gay community was ravaged by AIDS.
Yeah.
And I think it really underscored for me how important these books can be.
Yeah. I think for me, it was, I mean, they're all great in their own way, but I think two that really stand out one was Elda Minger, because she was someone who we really had no idea if it would even be.
No, we had to write her a paper.
We
letter.
wrote her. I mean, she's the first one we found through the paper letter, and it was kind of like, how's this going to go? And it was astounding, right? So it just felt like it was the first time I really felt like, oh, we're really doing something besides just, I don't know, like capturing voices, which if you wouldn't have to dig that hard to find maybe some interviews with some of those other people, right? Some of them, yes, some of them, no. So, but Elda Minger was the first one where I really felt like, oh, we have really found something miraculous. And then the second I would say is Nora Roberts, because I felt when she told the story about Janet Daly and plagiarism, I just felt like real profound respect for how much she cares about her work. And I think it's so easy without even realizing it to sometimes take on the culture's belief that these books are worthless. And I don't feel that way, but I don't know how else to say it. But like the hurt and pain and raw emotion and anger that she felt talking about it 30 years later was still there. This was her work, and someone had stolen it from her.
And more than that, the
Yeah.
community tried to tell her not to worry so much.
Yes.
About it.
Yeah. And
Instead of supporting the
Yes.
work as art,
Yeah.
they were basically like, well, it matters more that we look okay.
right. Like, it's not just a funny, like, footnote to her. Right. And there's something about the power of that, of saying, like, this is our work. This is our work. Just felt really meaningful to me, too.
How about this one? Are there tropes and subgenres that you used to love but are now tired of?
Mm.
And I'm going to add, this is Allison's question, but I'm going to add a second one, which is there a trope that you didn't used to love
Oh, that you do.
that now you're like, oh no, I love that. I love reading that.
You know, it's interesting. I would say some things have been like I've never liked Secret Baby, and I didn't back then, and I don't really now. Some have been steady. I think if you'd asked me 10 years ago if I like fake dating, I would have been like, yeah, sure, why not? What's not to like? And then now I'm tired of it, right?
Yeah.
Just from the sheer amount of it. I think it is no surprise that people who have been around for a while in a longer term relationship find marriage and trouble romance far more compelling than ever, right?
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I spent a lot of time thinking about is a trope I really love in one way, but if you put the shoe on the other foot, I would not like it. So, for example, teaching, Hot for Teacher, I never want to read ever, right? There's no way that you could like flip it around. Like, well, what if the older person's the teacher, the younger person's the student, or like, right? Like, what if you flipped it around and none of it, right? But like, sometimes but I know why that is. That's because of my job.
Right.
But like, I have to sometimes think about like, well, why will I read a gazillion mafia romances, right, where he's the criminal, but like I'm not as drawn to books where she's the criminal in a male-female romance, maybe. So I don't know. I think sometimes that's like a fruitful area for me to just think about my own blind spots. Yeah, I don't know if that's a good answer to that question, but that's what I'm going to tell you.
Yeah. I think my answer is also certainly the answer to the question for me is Secret Baby. I really loved Secret Baby romances when I was an early reader, and now they are incredibly difficult for me to believe. It's not that I'm like, oh no, Secret Babies,
Right.
but it's like especially in contemporaries, what on earth? What are these women doing?
Yeah, right.
Make better choices.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think
So I think especially like with the whole, not to put too fine a point on it, but with the whole the politicization of women's bodies over the last,
right.
well, I mean, millennia, but also specifically over the last couple of years, it feels like Secret Baby is a much harder sell for me
Right.
as a reader. I would say in the reverse, Second Chance and Marriage in Trouble are books that I was never interested in when I was young and now really love.
Yeah.
Because I think I'm just
Sure, at a different
I'm
place.
wiser in many ways than I was when I was 15.
Sure.
But
like, I mean, it's funny you say Second Chance, because Second Chance I actually like, but there's like a part of Second Chance I will never believe, which is, we haven't seen each other in 14 years.
That is new. There is a you're right. There's a rash, and I would agree. There is a rash right now of second chance romances that harken back to high school.
Yeah.
And those are not for Sarah
right.
necessarily.
Well, and I just feel like for me, I am interested in Second Chance in the sense of we're different people now. We have a shared past, but we're different people. And so now these new people we are falling in love. Mm-hmm. But like the whole idea of like, it's just 15 years later or 20 years later, and we haven't seen each other and we haven't talked to each other, likely one or both of us have been in important other relationships and had lots of life events, but we are still just in love the same way we were when we were 18. Like I don't really believe that. And it's funny because someone on Twitter, because I was talking about this, was like, but this happened to me. And I was like, yes, but you're not in a romance novel. Right. You're in real life, and truth is stranger than fiction. And in fiction, I need actually some, I just don't believe that. I just think that's like a kind of shortcut for the author. Yeah. Right now, I don't have to do any work of showing them falling in love because I'll just tell you that they have already been in love. And I'm just like, I don't know. Not for me. NFJ, not for Jen.
Okay. What is the thing that has surprised you the most doing the podcast? That's a good question. I have to sneeze. Hang on. I'll cough.
Okay. One, how many seasons we are in?
We had a meeting, everyone, yesterday. Whenever we're together, the three of us, we have a meeting. And I mean, we have other meetings too, but they're day-long meetings where we like
just talk about the podcast,
order food, and have meetings. We had a meeting yesterday, and honestly, we're coming up on our 300th episode. And like there was a whole discussion about 300 episodes and whatever, the tech of it all. And that's bananas.
Yeah.
That's a lot of episodes of this podcast.
Well, and that, like, I'll be really honest, like, I could see another 300 in our future. Like, I don't feel like we've run out of ideas. No, we have not run out of ideas. We haven't run out of things to say. And I think that's a real testament to, and I guess here's what I would say, like, my deep understanding is that if you had asked me if romance was different or had changed before the podcast started, I'd have been like, no, romance is just romance. But now I'm like, no, the reason we can keep talking about romance every week is because there is always something to talk about, but romance itself is so flexible and nimble. And there's just like a real opportunity for a lot of discussion because it's about society and who we are.
Yeah. I mean, I think that fundamentally, though, for me, the most surprising piece of it is how many people wanted the podcast.
Yeah.
Because at the beginning, we sort of thought, okay, well, we'll do the first season and it'll just be one season. We'll do IAD and that'll be done. Because who could possibly want to listen to us talk about romance novels every week?
Right.
And weirdly, you all do.
Well, but I think the other part too is like it's a community now, right? And I feel like it's a community in whatever way you want to engage in it. If it's just like the three of us in your car as you drive to work, that's our community. Or for some people, it's on the Discord or on social media or at Fated Mates Live. And I think that's the part that have thought about a lot. It's
Yeah.
like what it means to make a community about a shared thing you love. And yeah, so. Okay, I have a question that I thought actually was super interesting from the Discord, which was, okay, why do we think World War II belongs to women's fiction and not romance?
I think it's really difficult to write war
That's my take.
as being romantic or sexy in any way.
Yeah.
And so I think women's fiction is able to back burner the romance, even in the most romancy of World War II women's fictions. And a lot of them are. Like a lot of them have a romance kind of sailing through the background. But I think when you write about war or you set a story during a war, the war becomes the A plot.
Right.
And fundamentally, that's not the role of romance.
Right.
So even when you look back, like all of Regency is arguably set against the Napoleonic Wars, or much of Regency is set against the Napoleonic Wars, but like we never see war.
No.
We never, like all those medievals that were, you know, where we would see like battle.
Right.
We didn't see war. We didn't see systemic, we didn't see starvation or the innate struggle to and will to survive. We didn't see whole cities being bombed. I mean, World War II is a devastating blight on our history in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I think you just can't make it sexy.
I think I'm going to say,
I think if you tried, you would be doing a disservice to the story.
well, and here's what I would say is I think that also speaks to, now I'm talking about America here, everybody. I think it also speaks to the way culturally we have told ourselves a story, or the kinds of World War II stories Americans like to tell. Right. And World War II stories Americans like to tell are about like, you know, like essentially like everyone else is the bad guys and we were the good guys. Right. Right. Exactly. And I think that, so I think that's part of it. And I think that that means that almost every World War II story we've ever seen, and I'm sort of making air quotes here, has been a story about the war itself, but not the story about the home front. But that was not true for Vietnam. Vietnam was a story about the home front in America because we weren't over there experiencing it in the same way, right? I think that when we think about the way that
it was so really fractured.
Yes.
Right. Like
right. There wasn't there wasn't a sense that
it wasn't a unified front.
Yes.
On the home.
We're the good guys. Right. So, and again, I'm saying all this with like question marks, air quotes.
Are all like we're painting with broad brush.
Right. I'm not saying any of this is true. I'm just saying it's like in like our cultural way of talking about it. So, you know, I think it would be like, well, what would it mean to have a World War II romance about a soldier who had come back and said, we weren't doing the right thing, right? All those broken Vietnam heroes that I love so much was because it was politically.
Yeah, but they weren't saying that on the page.
No, but you could show them as being broken.
Yeah, it's interesting because the only time I can think of anybody really like overtly talking about the toxicity of war, right? Of like of military complex is Judith McNaught in A Kingdom of Dreams, and which she wrote post Vietnam,
right? And
was clearly speaking to what was happening on the home front in America after post Vietnam, but she said it in medieval England, and so
right, of course,
so he could say something that contemporary writers couldn't say,
right? And I think that there's a way in which we sort of collectively decided that like World War II stories are a certain kind of thing. And, you know, that
I like that too. I like the sort of, we don't like the mess of war.
Yeah. Oh, no.
And we certainly don't like the feelings of war. Like, we don't like, I mean, if you think about World War II specifically is the question. Like, obviously Vietnam, there's like a different kind of feeling that's portrayed on film, but we like to think that everybody who came back from World War II was like proud and noble.
Yes, exactly. And, right. And the fact is that's arguably not true because many of the Black soldiers who came home from World War II essentially rolled right into the civil rights movement, right? And so it's like,
well, war is messy no matter what side you fight on.
Right.
You do terrible things no matter what.
Yeah, but I mean, like their experience of the homecoming wasn't the same as white soldiers, is what I'm saying. So, I mean, I think that those are, I guess here's the other thing I'd say.
I'm adding to not.
Right. Yeah. Here's the other thing I guess I would say is if romance had started in 1943 and 1973, maybe it wouldn't be so impossible for us to imagine.
That's a good question. Maybe it was never contemporary, so
we didn't know how to deal with it because it was never contemporary, and we haven't figured out historical is still so
well because historical romance isn't about history, everyone.
Right.
It's about what's happening right now.
So I don't know if that was interesting, but I thought that was a really interesting question.
This week's episode of Fated Mates is sponsored by Liana De La Rosa, author of Isabel and the Rogue.
So Isabel Luna Valdez is basically like the forgotten wallflower of the Luna sisters, but it actually works to her advantage because she absolutely has her own plans as a spy, essentially helping to figure out if there is hidden information in the British aristocracy that can help Mexico during the French occupation. So while they're at balls, she is slipping through libraries and private studies, trying to essentially find out any hidden information that's going to help her country. And one night she runs into the rakish and handsome Captain Sirius Dawson. He is a covert agent for the British Home Office. He's also there spying. And so, like, basically these two are having like a real cat versus mouse situation. She's defying society to protect her country. And this British war hero is all of a sudden deciding maybe what he wants to do is protect her.
Oh, boy.
However, are they on the same side? Can she ignore her heart if it means turning her back on her country? What's going to happen? I love it.
Except I do know because I've read it and they totally get together.
I hope so.
If you want to read Isabel and the Rogue, you can do that right now in print, ebook, or audiobook. And if your podcasting app supports it, you can click on the chapter title right now to be taken to buy the book. Thanks to Liana De La Rosa for sponsoring this week's episode.
I think this is for you.
Oh, okay.
At least I hope it's for you. I don't understand all of the lingo.
The lingo.
But this says most recent fave MC romance, and I think that must be Motorcycle Club.
Yeah, right. No, that is for me.
That's from C. DeLam.
Yeah. Everybody, I would say that it's the Ghost Town East series by Amelia Shea, which I feel like has just been a really strong entry. It's like 10 books long, and it's interesting because there's like a ghost town, I think, but Ghost Town East is the one I really like. And I think part of it is because it starts off with a group of men who are essentially like moving from one part of the state to another. And they're like sort of going back to reclaim some territory that they had like lost for whatever reason. And so a lot of it feels like in some ways like old medievals, right? Like we lost our castle because our previous leader lost it to like in his dumb, rage fueled wars with his enemies, and we're going to try and get it back. And that means we all have to like work together in order to do it. One of the other things I really like about this series is, and I think people have heard me say this, is the heroines in this series are firmly middle class. They are teachers and nurses, and one of them works like at a convenience store, and I that is very appealing to me because it just feels like it's not a motorcycle club romance in the sense of it being like lawlessness or whatever. It just really is like family, and yeah, it's terrific. It's great.
So there are 2 questions here about Bridgerton. And I would just say I have not watched the 3rd season yet, but of course I have seen the discourse. I'm saving it for when I'm done with my revision, and then I'm going to watch all of the episodes all at once. But there is a question here about thoughts on Bridgerton, a big spoiler in Bridgerton. How about this? We'll just say thoughts on the big thing that happens at the very end of the 3rd season. And my thought on that is that sounds fucking great. Let's go.
Oh, I know that what you're talking about. Yeah, absolutely. I guess, and maybe people have heard me talk about this. A really fun thing I teach is adaptation.
And the Yulene episode too. We
talked about this. Yeah, so maybe listen to that episode. And I just don't have any expectation that a TV show filmed on Netflix in 2024 or any desire for it to follow. It's not, adaptation is not a faithful rendering of the original text, especially when the original text is 25 years old. So, let's go.
Ready. Yeah. Everybody's very good looking, and I can't wait to watch it.
Yeah, everybody. The truth is, Sarah's going to watch it and have a good time. I'm so not a watcher. I'd never even finished season 2. I didn't watch the Queen Charlotte run. I haven't watched an ounce of this one and never will. I watch one TV show a year, and I spent that on Reacher. Sorry, everybody. Catch me in 2025.
Oh, Reacher. Lee Child is Jen's actual favorite author. Do you have any more?
Yeah. Many. I have many too. Let me see ones that I thought were really good. Let's see. Oh, this is actually a really fun song. So this is Kelly on the Discord asked, if you had an entrance song, like a walk-up song, what would it be?
My walk-up song is George Michael's Too Funky.
Nice. All right.
Hey, you're just too funky for me. I got to get inside of you.
Nice.
And I'll show you heaven if you'll let me.
There you go. Perfect.
George Michael is the greatest thing that ever was. And in fact, we were talking about him last night at dinner. He is my one, my only.
Your one, your only. Yeah. I will tell you I feel like we must have talked about this at some point because I feel like you're going to laugh or have laughed at me for saying this. So back in the day when during work, we would have assemblies where people would give book talks, and the guy who ran assemblies had walk-up music for everybody. And every time I would go up to give a book talk, which was pretty much the only reason I would do it. Although this year I would get up and talk about the band on your t-shirt or the WNBA. My walk-up music was Every Day I Write the Book by Elvis Costello.
Yeah.
I don't write a book, but I talk about them. And I do think though, sometimes I'm my real walk-up music by Elvis Costello would probably be Town Crier. I'm the town crier, and everybody knows I'm a little down with life.
That's very real,
right? Yeah, but that's a song I really love. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I have as great of an answer as Too Funky, but there you go.
I mean, I have been thinking about it for a long time.
Okay, there you go. Okay, you want to do another one?
Yeah. How about? Okay, lots of questions about Fated Mates Live and what the plan is. The plan is to do another one. That is all the plan that we have. All we can tell you is that it will be in New York next year, but it will not be in March.
Yeah, it'll be in the summer sometime.
Probably.
Yeah.
Although summer next year is messy. So we will get, as soon as we know, you will know. Is our promise to you. There is also a question about whether or not there will ever be a Fated Mates Live in Chicago, and I think yes. But we don't know what that will look like. That is not on the schedule for 2025 yet.
Yeah. I think one of the let me just we'll talk a little bit about our process. One of the things I just sort of think we're in conversation about is are these events we want to hold? Do we want to just have a bookstore that's please come and we'll tell everybody and you just show up? I mean, I think we're kind of just trying to figure out how that, the best way for that for us to work. I really do enjoy Fated Mates Live. And one of the things that just despite my I'm the town crier claim, when I look at the photographs from Fated Mates Live and see how
I know
just how happy and how much fun everyone was having, and the like absolute like joy on people's faces. It is like a pure shot of serotonin that lasts me for a really long time. So we'll definitely do it again. It's just always a question of like, do we want to do it the same or different? And what's that going to look like? But it's definitely not going to be March. The problem is if it's not summer, I don't know when it would be. And so then we run into like, you know what I mean? The reason it's been March has been my spring break, everybody. And it's just like summer's when I have off and I don't have other times like that. So it's kind of hard to figure out. We'll figure it out.
So Nisha Sharma is here, and she asks if we can name books from the last 3 years that we think have taken the finger.
Okay.
So everyone, we talked about taking the finger on a recent episode, but it's a Fatemates term that basically just means like books that like have they don't pull the punch. They tell the story the way the story is meant to be told. They are maybe messy, or they're fearless, like books that have fearless writing. I would say my first one from the last 3 years, interestingly, most of them I think are going to be historical for me. I think Adriana's Island Princess Starts a Scandal, which is sapphic, historical, and tackles that kind of really like it's really a banger of a book when you think about it as a feminist text. Like what she's really doing with that book is questioning the way we think about feminism and like inclusivity, and the way the table that we all sort of are jockeying for position around is built and structured. And should we be blowing up the table instead of? And I think it's a book that really tells that story. It's a book that's incredibly sexy. I think that whole series really works on a number of levels. And I think Adriana is very fearless when it comes to historical.
Yeah. I have a historical that I will mention. I've mentioned it again. I think it's been in the past 3 years. And that book is The Duchess Hunt by Lorraine Heath, which is a book that it kind of is actually, what I read it and was like, okay, I enjoyed it, but it is a book that has really stuck with me. And often the things that stick with me, the stick with itness, are me. It's the taking the finger part of it. And this is kind of spoilery, but in this book, the heroine, we find out it's clear from the beginning that she has a secret that that plagues her. And that if anyone ever found out about it, it would like ruin her life. And halfway through the book, you understand that the hero also has a secret that if anyone found out about it, it would ruin his life. And he never fucking thinks about it. And at first I was like, this is kind of pissing me off, right? Like, why is it that she is so like stuck when arguably what he has done is way worse? And then I was like, oh, I'm so fucking stupid. Like, that's the point. Like, that is Lorraine actually saying, right? The way that women like sort of internalize feelings of shame and guilt and can't let them go. Whereas men in this case, are able to see something pragmatically that must be done in order, and that it has to be done. And therefore and even though that was the same for both of them, they both had to do the thing they do to save their family. Their way of internalizing was so different. And I think it is absolutely brilliant because I think that she does not hold the reader's hand about it at all. It is never, right? I don't know if that makes sense. Like, there's no point where, like, they sit down and she's like, well, why do you think, you know what I mean? And I feel like sometimes, don't get me wrong. There have been times as an editor, I've kind of been like, okay, you need to hold the reader's hand a little bit more. But in this case, Lorraine completely resists the urge to hold the reader's hand. Like, you're either going to figure it out on your own or you are not. And I think if I could go back to whatever year that is, I would absolutely put it on the best of the year list. And I didn't, because it took me a long time to really like sit with it and be like, what was that book doing? And that, so I don't know. I think that for me is a good example of one that's, I think, really taking the finger. And then I have a contemporary. Hold on.
I mean, I guess within 3 years, like, I keep coming, if outside of historical, it feels like C.M. Nascosta, like Morning Glory Milking Farm is a really was very exciting for me as a reader. Like, it was sexy and weird and kinky, but small town, and about like cultural shit and the way that it embeds itself in us, and also about like how we find our communities. And it was operating on so many different levels, despite the fact that it was fundamentally about like a woman, and it was about like bodily autonomy and like pharmaceutical industries. Like, there was so much to unpack about that book that, and ultimately, like, the only reason why I picked it up is because I was like, surely a book about Minotaur milking is just a laughable experience. Sure. And it was such a delightful surprise to see her just like leave it all on the table.
Yeah. I think that's a good answer. Okay, I just recently read, everybody knows I really like Farrah Heron's books. I put Jana Goes Wild on our best of, maybe it was last year, and her new one is called Playing House, and it is about a woman who is about to undergo a double mastectomy because she's a carrier of whatever that gene is. And I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of it or the letter combination of it. And it is at this moment where she falls in love with an old high school friend who essentially, and again, like, this is, I think if you are interested in like second chance romance that really works, I think nobody is doing it better than Farrah Heron. And part of the reason I say that is because they are never the same. And so in this book, they're like lab partners in high school, and this is like the first guy she ever slept with, and he like ghosts her afterwards, and it's kind of like due to his own like feelings of embarrassment and kind of like not really knowing what he got into, and them going off to college anyway, and then now they are going to reunite, and she's having this double mastectomy, and he kind of through romance reasons needs a place to stay, and he agrees to essentially help her through the like beginning immediate part of the surgery, which is just like really painful. And, there's drains that need to be, all this stuff. And the thing that I really thought was brilliant about this book is he's like a celebrity. He's been cast in like a Marvel type superhero role. And she is a very private person. And I think that the book is really playing around with the difference between secrets and privacy in a way that I think really works. And I really ended up liking this book and thinking, here is a person, Farrah Heron, who I think it's true every time, is really like, I am going to really try and dive deep into something that is real, that is a real conflict. Right? How can I go into being in a relationship with this man whose life is everywhere when I am going through something so private she won't even disclose to her workplace why she needs to go on medical leave? And I just thought it was great. It was really good. I literally just finished it last week. So
I got to talk about The Duke Gets Even too, though, because Joanna Shoup's, the final book in the Fifth Avenue Rebel series, the final book in the series. I mean, first of all, it's so wildly sexy. Like the structure of this book flies in the face of really how historical romance is structured usually. Like it begins with them both kind of naked in the water. Yeah. Like strangers coming upon each other in the water. like it's really not, it feels so historical, but then also like really is twisting the whole genre in on itself. And then it's probably the first romance I've read. It's Gilded Age, so it's already sort of it's outside of Regency or England, but it's probably the only romance I've really read, the only historical, at least, well, the only romance I've really read where like abortion is on the page. Like it is a huge piece of the puzzle. Like this book is set all twisted around the Comstock laws where, you know, the United States was banning abortions on a massive scale. The heroine does not want to have children. She is committed to making sure that like women have access to, you know, birth control and choice. And Joanna is operating on a level. I mean, you all heard us talk about Joanna a few weeks ago. I really believe she is the best of us in historical right now. She is one of the best of us in historical right now. And in part it's because of this kind of fearlessness.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's Joanna's writing in general, and I think it is because I've read so many of them. They all feel like they have no fucks to give. But like, if you want a book where like, it's just balls to the wall, like it's just all there. She leaves nothing on the table.
Yeah. That's you.
That's her.
This week's episode of Fated Mates is sponsored by Blue Box Press, publishers of Audrey Carlin's The Marriage Auction, Season 2.
So in season 1 of The Marriage Auction, you are introduced to basically the best, sexiest, spiciest romance version of like the marriage online auction you've ever seen. And here it's season 2. So we have 3 women and 1 man who are putting themselves up for auction in a really high stakes game of marriage, money, and mayhem. It's super spicy. The characters are intense and like really like over the top fun plotting. And it's filthy, gritty, angsty, soapy, everything you always wanted in the middle of summer. So in this first book of season 2, we're going to meet the candidates, right, for the marriage auction. Maya, a 24-year-old pickpocket with a tragic past who just wants to secure her financial future. Memphis, a college football player who had big dreams of the NFL, but they didn't work out. Summer, a California cannabis farmer. And Julianne, who was like raised in the lap of luxury until her parents died. And then like, it turns out that they had nothing. So that's like in book 1, you meet the candidates. In book 2, you're going to meet the bidders. And in this 4-book series from Audrey Carlin, you're going to get all of the great over the top, super fun, everything that you would expect with like this kind of marriage auction plot.
So this incredibly sexy series is 4 books long, and they all drop this week. So you can absolutely binge the entire thing. You can binge it in ebook, in audiobook, or in paperback. If your podcasting app supports it, you can click on the chapter title right now to be taken to start your reading. Thanks to Blue Box Press and Audrey Carlin for sponsoring this week's episode.
Okay, I have a great question from the Discord, which I think is really fun, which is, again, I think it comes from that, like, their favorite category of these, like, daily questions, which is, and this is, like, a personal question, not a romance question, everybody. Okay. So I think it's nice to mix it up, which is, what is the biggest choice/event in your life that has set the course for a lot of what came after, or have set the course for like who you've become? Can you pinpoint any of those moments?
I did this with my daughter the other day.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Because we were talking about...
I should ask Little Romance this question.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't ask her whether she had this moment, because I think with a 10-year-old, that's
it's
tricky.
different. Yes, right.
Poor baby. She'd be like, the time you moved us from our old apartment to our new house ruined my life. And I think, honestly, weirdly, it was making the choice to go to a women's college for lots of reasons. Like, I think it gave me a lot. It taught me a lot of things about taking up space and like claiming, whatever. I think a lot of people have a lot of things to say about single sex education. And I think it's often very real, but more importantly, I wouldn't have met Eric if I hadn't gone there. I wouldn't have met the person who ultimately gave me my first job in publishing, who ultimately introduced me to, the person who would, dare me to write a romance novel, who ultimately would, connect me with an agent who would, move me forward. And I think, so when you trace it all back, I think it's that for me. Like, and it's weird because I don't think I would have, had a completely failure of a life had I not gone to that one college. But it feels like had I gone to a different college, my life would be completely different.
Yeah. I think for me, it was joining Teach for America, kind of a similar thing. Like I actually had a wonderful time in college and have a couple of friends I still keep in touch with. And I mean, I learned a lot about myself there, but like, I think I could have had that experience in any college, right? But I think moving to Texas, and it's not like, I'm still teaching. So, I mean, obviously in some ways it's about my like career, but I think a big part of it for me was like, I moved to Texas. I didn't know anyone. I like got in my car and drove 2,000 miles away from Philadelphia and like just did it. And I think what that taught me was that I could just do that. Right. And I did meet my husband there, and like we moved to California and we moved to Seattle and we moved to Chicago. And I think I've just like never been afraid of like those things. And I have in fact thought they were pretty normal. And then at one point I remember sort of talking to someone. I mean, I think my life is very boring and very normal. And at one point I remember talking to someone in high school who would like mentioned with some regret that they had like not taken those chances. And I'm not saying like there's anything wrong with like people who like live close to home and you know what I mean? Like it's just a different set of choices. And I think I've always been really grateful that I did that. And I would say, not to be too weird about it, but like the podcast has really changed my life. And I think it's like been in a similar way where when I started, I don't know if I've ever really talked about this that publicly, but like when I started reviewing romance for the Book Queen back in 2018, I think. No, it must have been earlier because you and I don't know. Anyway, I'm like, I don't know how long ago. No, we started the podcast in 2018. No, I think I started reviewing for the Book Queen a couple years before that. And I had gone through some things at work that it just felt like, I don't know, things I was hoping were going to happen didn't happen. And I just remember thinking like, I want to make my life different. And I'm going to keep my job. It's a good job, but I don't want my job to be my life. How can I? And I remember really thinking, like spending an entire summer thinking, how can I make my life what I want it to be? How can I change that? And I was like, I'm going to have a hobby. It sounds so dumb, but like, I'm going to start off by like reviewing. And what would that be? What do I like to do? And I felt like it was like a really important moment for me to like get back in touch with like me as myself and do things for me that weren't about anybody else, but like what I wanted. And I really specifically started reviewing romance instead of YA because I didn't want it to be about my job. And I was like, I love this thing.
Yep.
And I feel like now here I am. And it was really because I said, like, I'm important. I am important.
Yeah. I mean, I think this question is funny because like there are so many moments where there are two doors and you walk through one.
Right.
And it starts to feel by the time you're, I don't know, not that old, that when you walk through one, the other one's closed forever.
Yeah.
And what I am realizing now, as I am not that old,
right,
is that's not true. You can walk through the door. You can go back to doors. You can find new doors.
Or like a door, you walk through a door and 1,000 doors open in front of you.
Yeah. And every door Yeah, I feel like every decision that we make changes everything. Like, I think the podcast really was a huge thing for me too. And I just think, I think this is a fascinating question because it's like butterfly flaps its wings, right?
Right. Yeah. Okay. Okay, here's one for you, Sarah, which is if you were to co-author with someone, who would it be?
Lisa Kleypas.
Ooh, same.
I mean, you gotta go.
Yeah.
You gotta go big or go home.
Mhm.
And this one,
Yeah, that's interesting. What about like
Joanna?
what about like if you were gonna, would there ever be like a cross genre? Like I think a lot about like Jenny Cruzy and Bob Mayer, right? Like
Writing together.
Yeah, like someone who,
So like Lee Child.
well, that would be who I would say, but that's not who you would say. But like, is there someone an off? You know what I mean? Like,
That's a good question. That's a good question. Like outside of romance.
Yeah.
Huh. I mean, it would have to be someone. It would have to be someone outside of or in genre. Like, it would have to be a mystery writer or a thriller writer,
right,
where we like work together and I just wrote all the sexy parts.
right.
And
Amazing.
they wrote the plot parts.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a good question, but truly, like, what I would really in my perfect world, I would write like a big historical world with
Lisa Kleypas.
or Joanna or like somebody who I think is really like taking the finger every time.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, also, like I said, go big or go home. Like I want to sit down with Lisa and plot a series.
Yes, right, exactly. Yeah.
And that would be really fun.
Yeah, it would. Amazing. I love that.
Presley.
See, there you go. Woo, now we're cooking with gas. That's a great question.
This week's episode of Fated Mates is brought to you by Lucy Score, author of The Body in the Backyard, the 4th book in the Riley Thorne series.
So we've talked about this series before. It's a really fun romantic comedy / mystery series. Lucy is really just showing that she is double trouble here. So we've got Riley and we've got her love interest, Nick, and they kind of are partners in life and also in solving crime. And one day, Riley's very self-absorbed, very blowhardy news anchor ex-husband comes tearing back into her life because he's convinced someone is trying to kill him. He is desperate for Nick to take up this investigation, and Nick cannot stand this guy. So he's basically like, no, and he's probably just making it up anyway because that is exactly the kind of thing this guy would do. Unfortunately, Nick has a business partner who likes money, and so it requires Nick to take this job. And when it becomes pretty clear via a dead body that in fact someone is trying to kill Griffin, it's all hands on deck because he has when they go looking for his enemies, the list is a mile long. No one likes this dude.
Ugh.
So Riley is doing her psychic shenanigans. Nick is doing his investigating. There's an octogenarian investigator also kind of rattling around in the background. This is pure Lucy Score. So funny, so fun, and like a great summer read series if that's what you're looking for.
So if you love a woman sleuth solving mysteries in a romantic comedy, the Riley Thorne series is for you. And it is available in print, ebook, and audio, but this book, like the entire series, is also available in KU. If your podcast app supports it, tap on the chapter title right now to buy the book. Thanks to Lucy Score for sponsoring this week's episode.
Jen.
Yes.
This is really good. What is your best worst book? Meaning a book that you hate to love.
Oh God, I have so many.
We have a bunch that we don't talk. We're so embarrassed about them. We don't talk about them on the podcast.
Yeah.
And if you've heard some of our episodes, you know, like, they have to be really a problem.
I mean,
I have something.
You want to go first then? Or do you want me to go first?
I mean, I'm kind of embarrassed. So you go, I'm going to build up my courage.
Okay, here's what I'm going to say before we talk about this, because I think one of the things for me is like the book I'm going to talk about here essentially manages to break a lot of the rules that I would tell people, or like, things I would tell people to do. Like, this makes the book bad, and yet somehow it makes the book good, right? So I'm not saying, this is not a pejorative where we're like, this book sucks necessarily. Okay?
No, I don't think that's what we're.
Okay.
In fact, I think it's more like,
Yeah.
oh God, what?
This is against my personal ethos, right? Like, does that make sense?
This feels wrong.
Yeah. So for me, an author who pushes this button almost every time is Kristen Ashley, who I have read a lot. I have read a lot of fucking Kristen Ashley books, because I'm going to tell you what, like, and I think one of the things that I feel like really strongly is that the best books I like are the ones where there's good storytelling and there's good craft. And when I say craft, what I mean here is like the art of writing itself, the art of structure, the authors who are, right? Like, so a person who is amazing at craft would be like Kate Claiborne, right? Now, that doesn't mean Kate isn't a great storyteller, but like when we talk about like the writing, the craft, the structure, right?
Suggest someone a Kate Claiborne.
I would suggest anyone a Kate Claiborne novel.
Pulitzer Prize winning author, Salman Rushdie. Here's Kate Claiborne.
Here's Kate Claiborne.
Kristen,
right? But like Kristen Ashley, I mean,
God, Salman Rushdie reading pony play. It's now my dream.
But it's not even that. It's like, I don't understand sometimes even the way she writes a sentence. And I'm not trying to be mean. Like, there's a lot of really interesting, she has no filter. But I think because of that, talk about an author who takes the finger pretty much every time. She's like,
those books are so fun to read.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, there is literally a book called, I think my first Kristen Ashley book was called, oh God, Mystery Man, where this woman, essentially a man, like once a week breaks into her house and they have great sex and she has no idea who he is and what his name is. And I'm like, this is patently ridiculous. And yet, please, can I have some more? Right. And so I think that, like, for me, it's like, and they're bloated, they're messy, there's 700 breakups, they're 800 pages long. Sometimes, and I'm just like, whatever it is that Kristen Ashley does when she like opens up her id and pours it out onto the page, like, works for me.
Right. That's it for me. It's like Jessica Kane for me.
Oh, yeah.
You have these moments where you're like, what am I reading?
Yeah.
But also there's this really deep respect that I have for people who are able to write at that level, like just open a vein.
Yeah.
Because I think that it is so fearless.
Yeah.
In that they really are. I think you can tell when, and I do think this often happens in erotic more than anywhere else in romance, right, because of, I guess, the nature of the beast. But it really feels like when they open this vein, there is a complete fearlessness and lack of self-editing. Yeah. Right. And there's something really magnificent about that. Mm-hmm. Alexa Riley has this like second name called AR Taboo.
Amazing. You're right back.
You can't get them anywhere. You have to buy them directly from their website because they're so incredibly wrong. Yeah. And listen, these are complete one-handed reads and trigger warnings up and down the row, right? Sure. But, and I mean, they're not all for Sarah. In fact, most of them are not for Sarah, but I have read most of them because I feel like when they hit, they're going to hit, right? Aside from that, the writer in me is like, now, how do you do this? Like, how do you open a vein? Yeah. And just not think about it. Right. I think the other thing for me is like my love of motorcycle club romance. I have a lot of complicated feelings about because I am like, the way these men are often described, I was like, these are like white supremacists in Idaho, right?
So what does it mean? Like, what is it that I'm getting out of these books? And I think then that's like a real question. Like, what is it you're like, because that's not what I'm reading it for. Right. But then I'm like, oh, I'm reading it for like, it's like I said earlier, like it's medieval, it's modern day brotherhood. It's this sense of like us against the world. It's right. Like this idea that, you know, a really strong, like a community, a small community that has strong ties to each other or whatever. And that those ties are not about money. And I think that that's like a really big part of it. Like when you're reading a billionaire romance or whatever. Right. So I think that, but I feel like it also has helped me to like really pay attention to what I like and then realize, oh, that's why I don't just read them. A lot of them don't work for me at all. It has to be a very specific set of things that's working. And then I would say I have old favorites by that if I read them now, I would be like, what on earth? But I read them when I was 15.
My favorite romance that I turn to every few months, we've never talked about on the podcast.
And we never will.
I can't.
Right. I couldn't in good conscience recommend it to people. But what I am understanding about myself is like, they're like deeply comforting in a way because I am so familiar with them. It's like, just like the same way I was sitting down the other night and flipping through channels. I never sit down and watch TV. I was just really strung out and like Footloose came on and I fell right into it. Yeah. And I was like, this is a bad movie. And yet here I am watching it because it's about like, right. And I think there are some romances and I would never name them because they're not even about the romance. Those are about me, you know?
Yeah. And I think also, I think you can like personally, I think this is the challenge, right? With media in a world where we all know better now.
Mm-hmm.
So the books that installed our buttons, many of them no longer,
right.
Should we appreciate that these are not books that should be installing people's buttons anymore.
Right.
But the buttons are installed. And so I think the best we can do is sort of, I think you can have it both ways. You can both love a book and quietly enjoy it every few months and not ever speak about it.
Yeah, of course. Right. Like that's fine. That's just between me and my Kindle.
Appreciate that if you recommended it widely at this point, you would be doing harm.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
And to the genre.
Yeah, right. I mean, we can change and evolve and grow. Yeah. All right, let's just do one more. What's a good ending one for today?
All right. How about you must choose?
Oh, gosh. Okay. I'm ready.
This one's from Sophia Travers. She says, cold, grumpy hero or fun Playboy rake?
Cold, grumpy hero. See previous discussion. Yeah. Because you know what? I think for me, again, like sort of what's the work of romance or what is it in my life? And I think a lot of it is about this idea or unpacking this idea that just like there are ways, and again, I'm speaking here about MF romance and I'm speaking here about my own marriage. There are lots in my relationship with my brothers. I have two brothers. But there's a lot of ways I think in which romance has taught me that just because a person isn't showing their feelings openly, that doesn't mean they're not experiencing feelings. And that just like I have been taught to like sort of manage my emotions in one way, my husband has been taught to manage his emotions in another way. And I have been married to this man for almost 25 years and I still trip over that sometimes, right? Where I'm just like, why is he acting that way? And then I'm like, okay. So I think there is a way in which like cold and grumpy is really like a thing I spend a lot of time thinking about.
Patriarchy distilled.
Yes. I largely distrust fun and playful.
Me too.
Like,
but you know my husband, so
not mine.
My husband is also very silent.
Yeah.
And
right. I also think it's about unpacking me. I mean, I joked about being the town crier earlier, right? Like, I'm always like, I'm fun in other ways. I don't think I'm a not fun person, but like, I don't think I'm playful. Playful, I don't think is a word anyone would use for me.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, it's cold grumpy for me because, I mean, I like a grunter. God. And not in real life. In real life, I would like all men to speak their truth and have feelings.
Sure.
But in a romance novel, I like them to be just absolutely buttoned up until they can no longer bear the pain of it. And then I like them to crawl over broken glass.
Yeah.
And then break.
Sure. Me too.
And that hits better when he's cold and grumpy.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think one of the things about it is, I think romance. Okay, here's like another real fundamental belief I have about romance. And this is not really about books as much as it is like a life belief, right? Which is like, we can love a lot of people in our lives, but the loving relationships we give the most to, whether that be our parents, our friends, our children, our best friends, our colleagues, whatever, that like by giving love or putting it out into the world, that you're hoping to make the world a better place, right? And I think one of the reasons, and this is like saying a lot about me, is I think that often to me means like change, right? Like positive, good change. I believe romance changes people. And I'm like, you playful, happy people out there in the world, you just stay the way you are. Romance doesn't need to change you. Right? You stay there. Good job. And I did it, right? You're already a fully realized human being, right? And so I think it's funny to me that I have a hard time with that as like a starting point for a character, because I'm kind of like, well, you're already great. Look at you.
Yeah. I mean, also talk about installing buttons. Like, I still think about that that Elizabeth Lowell hero, the classic Elizabeth Lowell hero, who never, ever, ever smiles. Never, ever, ever shows joy. And then the first time he smiles, she literally describes it as a smile to make angels weep. Like, he just...
You got to realize what we came up with.
I mean, really, like we said, the buttons that have been installed are serious.
Interesting. Yeah. So, yeah, that's what I would say.
Anyway.
Yeah.
You've asked us. We've answered. We're sorry if we didn't get to your questions, but there were a lot of them. And we'll do another episode sometime soon, maybe. I am Sarah McLean. I'm here quite literally with my friend Jen Prokop. We are Fated Mates. You can find us every week on Wednesdays, wherever you listen to podcasts. Find us on Instagram at Fated Mates Pod. We're also on Blue Sky and Threads and Tumblr. Eric does something over there. We're also on YouTube. And thanks to you guys for always listening and for being interested in us enough to ask us questions and to listen to the answers.
Don't forget, everyone, keep listening for a selection from Jess K. Hardy's Lips Like Sugar audiobook happening right now.
Have a great rest of the week.
Chapter 1. Mira. Peering down through cotton so faded it was transparent, Mira stepped into the only pair of clean underwear left in her drawer, pulling them up carefully so they didn't disintegrate on their way over her thighs. While she hooked her last clean bra behind her back, a bright yellow disaster that could double as caution tape, she tried to remember where she'd bought it. And, more importantly, why? Halloween, maybe? That year she'd gone all in as a minion because Ian had wanted to be Gru? She frowned at her reflection in the full-length mirror, but she only had herself to blame. This was what happened when she slept in instead of doing laundry. She spent the day in the mummy's panties with a minion's tits. Taking a black tank dress out of her closet, she slipped it on, smoothed it down over her hips, and shoved her feet into a pair of red canvas flats. "Ian! You up?" she shouted, walking down the hall while slinging her hair up into a ponytail. "You need to leave in 5 minutes," he grumbled, a spoon of golden grams in suspended animation on the way to his mouth. "School started at the same time all year long, Mother." Ignoring her son's general 14-year-old grumpiness, she kissed his head through his curls and said, "Sorry, I slept in." "Neat," he slurred, mouth full. "I was up late making tarts." She opened the fridge and pulled out the OJ. "From Madigan and Ashley's wedding." Tarts? I thought you were making their cake. I'm making both. Is Mimi up? He shook his head. I heard her walking around in the middle of the night again. Standing from the table, he shuffled into the kitchen, rinsed his bowl in the sink, and put it in the dishwasher before she had to remind him. Miraculous. Hoisting his backpack over his shoulder, he said, Gotta go. She'd borne witness to every single day of Ian's existence, but it still shocked her, the way he'd miraculously transformed overnight into a tall, deep-voiced man-child with an Adam's apple budding from his throat, hair sprouting on his upper lip, and an occasional tood that made her want to check his skin for devil marks. Wait! She skirted around the counter, intercepting him before he could bolt down the stairs, spreading her arms wide. Hugs? With a tight, obliging smile, he leaned in for the most perfunctory, single-arm non-hug hug in the history of humankind. Pulling back, she studied him for the brief moment he allowed it, noticing the way his shoulders drooped, the shadows smudged under his hazel eyes. You okay, buddy? I'm fine, he replied flatly. You sure? Yep. I'd know if you weren't telling me the truth, she said, arching a brow. Because you came from me. I grew you, Mom. Inside my body. He palmed his forehead. Seriously, could you, not be so weird all the time? Taking a moment to straighten his backpack strap, she said, I could try, but I think I'd be setting us both up for disappointment. After watching him roll his eyes at her for the millionth time before he jogged down the stairs, she sighed the eternal sigh shared by mothers of quiet teen boys, poured juice into 2 glasses, cracked 4 eggs into a pan, and walked to the back room to wake up her mom. Mira! Her mom called out from the kitchen. Is it granulated or brown sugar for the snickerdoodles? I can't remember. 3 years ago, Linda Harlow could have recited every single glazed and confused recipe backward and forward, especially since she'd written most of them. But every day, something new slipped through the cracks. Today, it was the snickerdoodles. Did you check the binder? Mira asked, pushing the kitchen door open, finding her mom with a wooden spoon in one hand, a measuring cup in the other, an empty bowl in front of her, and her salt and pepper hair looking unwashed, unbrushed. At least it was shower night. The binder. Her mom glanced to her left, then her right, then frowned, confused, lost in that way that gave Mira's heart an express ride down to her stomach. Because it wasn't only forgetting. It was knowing she was forgetting. That this was something she should remember but couldn't. Sorry, Mom. Mira grabbed the binder she always took the blame for moving, even though she never did. I must have left it next to the sink. Swiping a hand across her brow, leaving an irritated smear of flour behind, she said, Don't make excuses for me, Mira. I know you didn't move it. What good is a recipe book if I can't remember where it is? It's just like Jen said. Mira placed the binder next to the empty bowl. No strategy is perfect. If one doesn't work, we try another, I know. Pointing her spoon in Mira's direction, she said, I used to change Jen's diapers, and now she's making labels and laminating signs to remind me where the forks go. It's not right. We can always find a different speech therapist. Maybe someone who hasn't been my best friend since we were 2 years old. There must be someone around here whose diapers you didn't change. Maybe in Bozeman? Missoula? Spokane? You're very funny. Seriously, though, Mira said, meeting her mom's stare, tiptoeing along the tightrope between concern and keeping things light, solving problems while trying not to make new ones. If it's weird seeing Jen, I'll drive you wherever we need to go. I think the therapy is helping, but I don't want you to be uncomfortable. The lines around her mom's mouth, between her brows, softened. I know you would. But you already do too much for us. Besides, I love Jen, you know that. It's just... When she looked around the kitchen, at the shiny signs taped up on every wall, the labels pasted on every drawer, the lines returned. These are the signs of our lives. Mira had to admit the signage was getting a little out of hand, but if they allow you to continue doing the things you want to do without me hovering over your shoulder all the time, they're worth it, right? While her mom's attention swiveled back to the mixing bowl, her mouth opening for a reply, the bell Mira's grandfather had hung above the bakery door nearly 75 years ago went ding. Hold that thought, Mira said, flipping to the snickerdoodle page in the binder. Is that a memory joke? Her mom's hand landed on her hip, her fingers pointing to the confused in the glazed and confused logo on her apron. Because I've already forgotten if it was funny. Mira snorted. At least it wasn't so bad yet. At least they could still laugh about it. At least her mom could still bake, even if she needed signs and binders to do it. She slid the glass container of granulated sugar across the counter, kissed her mom's cheek, and said, You know none of my jokes are funny. Switching the playlist from the indie mix they'd been listening to all day to late 80s, early 90s alternative, Mira pulled her ponytail tight while the first few drum beats of REM's It's the End of the World as We Know It played over the speakers. Not realizing the significance of the song, the obvious cosmic warning going rat-a-tat-tad, she walked down the hall, rounded the corner into the bakery, and froze in place like she'd hit concrete. Spinning on her heel, plastering herself against the wall, she hissed, Shit! Mira, what's wrong? Her mom called to her down the hallway, her preternatural skill of hearing any swear word uttered within a country mile fully intact. Is it a mouse? No, it wasn't a mouse. A mouse would have been great. Compared to the ex-boyfriend who'd bailed on her, then married another woman 2 minutes later, currently perusing her pie rack, a mouse would have been a goddamn delight. Mira? Paul said, his deep, familiar voice triggering a painful neck spasm. Are you back there? Fuck. Just a second, she said, louder than she probably needed to. I had to pee. Fantastic. Okay, Paul said slowly, probably running a hand through his dark brown hair, probably looking slick and handsome and completely put together while she had a neon yellow bra strap sliding down her arm. With a deep breath, she slid the strap back up, finger-combed her bangs, groaned as quietly as she could, then stepped into the bakery. Hi, Paul, she said woodenly. She looked at the floor, then at the clock on the wall, and finally, awkwardly, at his face. She blinked fast, protectively, like if she stared at him too long, her retinas would detach, which was something her optometrist had warned her about just last week after she'd started having floaters. How can I help you today? Did you get something in your eye? His head tilted in a way that made his soft hair swoop over his smooth forehead. Paul was one of those 50-year-old men who barely aged. No gray hairs, only enough wrinkles to be charming, retinas likely firmly attached. Must be some flour. Mira rubbed her eyes, then forced herself to look at him like a normal person. What are you doing back in town? We're here for the wedding. Oh, right. She mashed her lips together. Of course. Of course he was going, because, for some unknowable reason, the entire populace of Red Falls invited anyone they'd ever known to their weddings. Welcome back, I guess. How have you been? I've been meaning to call. A scoff launched out of her. Because if he was about to say he'd been meaning to call her, she was about to tell him he was full of shit. He hadn't reached out to her once in the 2 years since her mom moved in, and he hightailed it back to Bozeman. His expression fell, almost wounded, throwing her off balance the way raindrops did when the sun was still shining. Mira, please. Don't. She held up a hand. Don't, Mira, please me, okay? We're good. Everything's great. Mom's great, Ian's great, I'm super great. It was almost true. True enough. True adjacent. Oh, he cleared his throat. Okay, that's great. They stared at each other, lapsing into an awkward silence, until something clanged to the tile in the kitchen, and her mom yelled out, "I'm fine! Just dropped a beater!" "Are you looking for donuts?" Mira asked him. "Cupcakes? Perhaps a brioche or two?" "It's Chrissy. She wanted a..." "Polly! I can't believe this town still doesn't have a Starbucks!" Mira clutched the counter with both hands as Paul's wife breezed in through the door. With wavy strawberry blonde hair and a smile like a literal ray of sunshine, Chrissy was radiant in head-to-toe green satin. Paul, Mira thought, could not have picked a woman more precisely, perfectly, specifically not her. Chrissy gasped, her freshly French manicured hand landing on her chest. "You must be Mira. I have heard so much about you." Mira, at that moment, wished she was a turtle. How lucky they were, always having a place to hide. "I've heard so much about you, too," she said, trying to sound believable, trying to beat back the bitterness turning her stomach. It wasn't Chrissy's fault Paul had broken her heart. "What can I get for you?" "I'd give my right arm for a decent Americano," Chrissy moaned, throwing said arm dramatically onto the counter. "Polly promises me you have the best in town." "Does he?" Mira raised a brow. "What a kind thing to say, Polly." Closing his eyes for a long, tight-jawed blink, he said, "Make mine a decaf, please." Why was he here? Why was he in her bakery complimenting her coffee? Their breakup had been terribly amicable in the way adult breakups were, like the most devastating business transaction. They'd even shaken hands. Maybe she should have, but she'd never held it against him that he'd left. He'd never taken a blood oath to help her care for her mom while her mind slowly deteriorated. They'd only been together for a year. Plus, his toes were freakishly long, and he snored. Whatever. "2 Americanos, 1 decaf," she assured him with a raised finger. "Coming right up." When she turned around, scooping grinds into the portafilter, Chrissy asked, "Are you going to the wedding too?" Grounds scattered like dark roasted snow onto the counter. She was going to the wedding, but unlike Chrissy and Paul and probably everyone else on the guest list, she was going alone, solo, sans date, unless you counted the cake. She didn't want this to be happening. She didn't want to be this person, this sad, single, 50-year-old woman about to tell her ex and his gorgeous wife that she'd be going stag to the biggest wedding Red Falls had seen in years. But, she thought, clicking the portafilter into the machine a little too hard, what if I don't have to be that person? What if she did have a date lined up, but maybe he'd get sick? Maybe he'd come down with food poisoning so he couldn't actually go to the wedding? Paul and Chrissy would both be gone in a couple of days. Nobody would have to know her date wasn't real. No harm, no foul. "I'm going to the wedding." Her lie dripped faster than the espresso. "With my boyfriend." It felt wrong coming out of her mouth. But right and wrong were only mental constructs. Survival was what mattered here. "You are?" Paul asked while she poured their drinks. "Who is he? When did you meet? How long have you been—" "We, met a few months ago." She set their to-go cups on the counter, avoiding eye contact with either of them. "He's great. You'd like him." "That's... wow." Wow? That was his response? Why wow? Why was it wow-worthy that she had a boyfriend, even if he wasn't real? "It's not that groundbreaking, Paul. People meet new people every day." "That's not what I meant," he said in the calm, level way he said nearly everything. Like when he'd said, "I don't think this is working anymore." I'm just happy for you. Thanks, she offered, not sure how else to respond. Abruptly, he perked up, an idea light bulb blinking into existence above his head. We should sit together at the wedding. Her eyes popped at the jump scare. Oh, she hedged, trying to come up with some plausible excuse as to why that could never happen. He doesn't actually like sitting. Jesus Christ. Sweetie, I'm sure she'll be too busy. Chrissy moved in closer, clinging to Paul like moss to a tree. You're making the wedding cake, right, Mira? I am, but after I set it up, I'll just be a wedding guest too, Mira said for some inexplicable reason. Why wasn't she using Chrissy's question as the obvious slam dunk out it was? I think sitting together sounds great. What were the words coming out of her mouth, and why wouldn't they stop? It'll be great to catch up. The real Mira, the reasonable, rational Mira, disconnected from her body, floating above the counter in baffled mortification as the bizarro Mira below her continued making plans for her perfect ex-boyfriend to meet her non-existent new one. That's great, Paul said. And when he added, it's a date, her soul crashed back into her body, her heart pounding, her brain screaming, what the fuck? What had she done? What madness had her minion tits bewitched her into? There was no boyfriend, no date. Not unless she ran back into the kitchen and made one out of snickerdoodle dough. The silence descending while Mira slowly melted down, shattered, as the bell above the door dinged. Even though she'd heard that sound so often it was ingrained in her psyche, this ding was different. This ding trilled. It sang. It tinkled over her like sound confetti as a perfectly timed dream come true walked into her bakery. The man's movements were lithe as an alley cat's, his hair a soft, silvery blonde tousle. He wore a Cure t-shirt that looked like he'd scored it at one of their concerts in the 80s, faded jeans pulled straight from Cobain's closet, and dark sunglasses that reflected her shocked expression when he turned to look at her. Thank you, she offered up to the universe for this rare act of benevolence. Girding her loins, she said, Oh, here he is now, while flashing the stranger her best please play along eyes. Hey, baby. Her guilty warble was less than ideal. I've missed you. Michael Stipe's voice faded out. No one moved. No one breathed. The planet stopped spinning while Mira waited for her savior to call her bluff. After a pause seismic enough for tectonic plates to inch away from each other and create new continents, he slid his sunglasses up into his hair, set his brown-eyed stare on her, and with a smirk worthy of an Academy Award said, I've missed you too, sugar.